Set in rural Nigeria, this folktale follows Ada, a 12-year-old girl abandoned to her aunt's care after her parents' divorce. Instead of finding love, Ada faces child labor, hunger, and abuse. With African cultural backdrops, farms, markets, proverbs, and communal whispers, the story exposes child neglect, misplaced trust, and the silence of neighbors. In the end, Ada's father uncovers the truth, teaching a powerful Nigerian lesson. What the eyes refuse to see, the heart will one day confront. In the heart of a quiet Nigerian village where the red earth tells stories of generations and the evening moon gathers children for folk tales, a different kind of story was unfolding, one not told by elders, but hidden in the silent tears of a young girl. Ada was only 12, yet the weight of her world was heavier than the bundles of firewood she carried from the forest. She had dreams like every other child, dreams of school, laughter, and warm meals, but those dreams were buried beneath the harsh commands of her father's sister, Mama Nkechi. In a land where family ties are sacred, betrayal cut deeper than any whip, and Ada's innocence was slowly being swallowed by pain and silence. Her cries never reached the ears of the villagers, for they turned their faces away, whispering but never speaking up. Day after day, Ada's fragile body carried burdens meant for grown men, while her heart endured hunger, loneliness, and cruelty. Yet, like the stubborn roots of the iroko tree that dig deep into the earth, hope refused to die in her. What Ada did not know was that truth has a way of traveling on the wind, and one day it would find its way home. Divorce in an African home is like a broken calabash. Once it falls, it can never return to its perfect shape. Ada was only 12 when her parents separated, a decision that shook her small world like thunder over the village skies. In Nigeria, where the family bond is considered sacred and children are expected to grow under the watchful eyes of both parents, the break of Ada's home left scars too deep for her young heart. Her father, a man trying to rebuild his life in the city, took custody of the children. Yet, because of work and survival, he left Ada with his elder sister, Mama Nkechi, believing that family would care for family. He did not know that sometimes the deepest wounds are called by those we call our own. At first, Ada thought village life would bring comfort. The smell of roasted corn along dusty roads, the sound of goats bleating at dusk, and children running barefoot in the evening breeze. But her hope faded quickly. Mama Nkechi's eyes held no warmth, only the sharpness of a woman who had long buried kindness under resentment. "You are not here to eat and enjoy," Mama Nkechi said on Ada's first day. "You will learn how to work, or else hunger will teach you." In those words, Ada's fate was sealed. What should have been a home became a prison of endless chores and empty plates. Nigerian culture values communal care, where every aunt or uncle is seen as a second parent. But Mama Nkechi carried jealousy in her heart. She despised Ada's father for building a life in the city while she remained in the village. That bitterness spilled onto Ada, turning the young girl into a target for her frustrations. Day after day, Ada was sent to fetch water from the stream, carry heavy loads of cassava, and sweep until her tiny hands blistered. Each task was accompanied not with gratitude, but with scolding, as though she had done something wrong simply by existing. Villagers noticed Ada's tired steps, her torn clothes, and her sunken cheeks. Yet they whispered behind closed doors instead of speaking up. "That child suffers too much," an old man muttered at the marketplace. "But it is family matter," another replied, shrugging off responsibility. In African society, the fear of interfering in family issues often silences witnesses, even when injustice is clear. So Ada remained unseen, her tears swallowed by the red earth, her cries carried away by the harmattan wind. The broken calabash of Ada's family was more than a story of divorce. It was a warning. When trust is misplaced, a child becomes the victim of decisions they did not make. In Nigerian homes and across African villages, the lesson is clear. Family should be a shield, not a spear. If those entrusted with children betray them, the community must rise, for silence only deepens the wounds of the innocent. By the time Ada turned 13, her childhood had already been stolen. Instead of waking to the laughter of friends on their way to school, she rose to Mama Nkechi's harsh voice, ordering her to fetch firewood or head to the farm. But the worst of all her tasks came with the soaked corn. Each week, Ada was forced to carry a heavy basin on her small head, trekking to a distant village to grind it. The road was long, dusty, and unforgiving. Sometimes the harmattan winds blew dust into her eyes. Other times, the scorching sun burned her bare feet against the cracked earth. She had no transport fare, no food, and no water. Her only company was the basin that pressed down on her neck like a punishment. As she walked past the village square, people watched. Some pitied her, but said nothing. In Nigeria, where child labor is often brushed aside as normal training, Ada's suffering was dismissed as part of growing up. But deep inside, she longed for the school books she once held, for the sound of children reciting multiplication tables instead of the crunch of gravel under her tired feet. She dreamed of sitting in a classroom again, raising her hand to answer questions, instead of carrying burdens that bent her small back. One day, halfway to the grinding mill, Ada stumbled and almost fell. The basin tilted dangerously, spilling some of the soaked corn onto the ground. She quickly knelt, scooping it back with trembling hands, tears rolling down her face. If Mama Nkechi sees this, she whispered to herself, she will not let me eat tonight. For Ada, every mistake came with punishment. Her tiny stomach often growled with hunger, but fear of her aunt's cane and threats kept her moving. Each step felt like an eternity, each mile a reminder that her life was not her own. The people in the next village noticed her too. A woman selling groundnuts asked kindly, "My child, why are you walking alone with such a heavy load?" Ada lowered her eyes and mumbled, "It is for my aunt." The woman sighed deeply but said no more. In African communities, the shame of questioning another family's treatment of their child often silences compassion. And so Ada walked on, carrying not just the soaked corn, but the weight of a culture that too often normalizes the suffering of its daughters. A burden meant for grown men was laid on the head of a 13-year-old girl, and nobody dared to intervene. The lesson is bitter but clear. In Nigeria and across Africa, children are not meant to be beasts of burden. Their shoulders are for dreams, not for endless loads. Every time society turns away from their pain, it plants seeds of silence that grow into forests of broken futures. Night in the village should have been filled with laughter, the smell of roasted yam, and the chatter of families gathered around kerosene lamps. For Ada, it was a different reality. At just 14, her nights were often spent staring at the ceiling, her stomach growling louder than the crickets outside. Mom Nkechi never allowed her to eat freely. "Food is not for greedy mouths," the woman would hiss, dishing out only scraps and leftovers from the day before. Sometimes Ada went to bed without a single morsel, tears streaming silently down her cheeks as she clutched her empty belly. Hunger became her cruelest companion, a shadow that followed her every night. In Nigeria, where food is more than sustenance, but a symbol of love and hospitality, denying a child nourishment was like denying her humanity. When the neighbors slaughtered chickens for festive seasons, Ada smelled the aroma but never tasted it. She often watched other children licking soup off their fingers with joy, while she quietly licked her own lips to trick her brain into believing she wasn't starving. Hunger gnawed not only at her body, but also at her dignity. Each night she wondered, does my father know? Does he care? One evening, after a long day of farm work under heavy rain, Ada returned home drenched, shivering, and weak. She hoped, at least, for a warm plate of gari or beans. Instead, Mom Nkechi gave her a cold remnant of eba from 2 nights before. The food was sour, but Ada ate it in silence, her tears mixing with each swallow. She thought of the promise her father once made, "You will never lack as long as I live," and the memory cut deeper than her aunt's cane. Love, to her, now felt like a distant folktale told to other children, not a story meant for her. The village elders often said, "A child who eats well grows with laughter in her bones," but Ada's laughter had long been stolen. Malnourished and frail, she still woke each morning to more chores, her body surviving, but her spirit slowly dimming. Even the little goats in the compound seemed healthier than her. Yet she refused to give up hope entirely. She whispered to herself in Igbo, "Chim ga-azapotam, my God will save me," drawing strength from the faith she still carried deep inside. Hunger in a child's life is not just about food. It is about love, dignity, and care. Across Nigeria and Africa, many children like Ada are silenced by empty plates and broken promises. The lesson is clear. Hunger is not a game, and no child should be punished with an empty stomach. When food becomes a weapon, it does not only starve the body, it starves the future. In every African village, the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. But for Ada, the village became a silent witness to her suffering. At 14, her fragile frame told a story no words could capture. Each day, she staggered through the market square with firewood piled high or buckets of water sloshing on her head. The people saw her sunken cheeks, her tired steps, and the faint scars on her arms, but they turned their faces away. In Nigeria, where family matters are treated as sacred and untouchable, no one dared to interfere. They whispered behind closed doors, but their silence echoed louder than their pity. One woman at the stream once asked softly, "Ada, are you all right, my daughter?" Ada forced a smile and nodded, though her heart was breaking. She had learned the price of honesty. Every complaint only brought more punishment. Still, the whispers grew. An old woman in the marketplace muttered, "That child suffers too much." Someone else replied, "It is not our concern." And so, the silence of the community became as heavy as the burdens Ada carried daily. The very people who could have been her shield chose to become bystanders in her pain. One evening, after Ada returned late from the farm with bruises on her arms, an elderly neighbor finally spoke up. She whispered to a trader traveling to the city, telling him of the girl's endless suffering. That whisper would later travel to Ada's father, though she did not know it yet. For now, Ada's nights were still filled with tears, her prayers unanswered, her hope shrinking. The cries of one child, ignored by many, became the village's silent shame. The truth is clear. When a community turns away from a child's pain, it becomes part of the abuse. In Nigeria and across Africa, no proverb can excuse silence in the face of suffering. The lesson is simple but urgent. If the village refuses to raise a child, the child will grow carrying scars that the village itself cannot erase. It was on a dusty afternoon, the kind when the Nigerian sun scorches without mercy, that Ada's life began to change. She was returning from the grinding mill, balancing a heavy basin of blended corn on her head. Her legs trembled, her neck ached, yet she pushed forward, knowing Mom Nkechi's wrath awaited her if she delayed. Just then, a motorbike slowed beside her. To her shock, it was her father. His eyes widened as he took in the sight of his daughter, frail, thin, and struggling under a load meant for grown men. In that moment, his heart broke in ways words could never capture. "Chai, Ada, my daughter," he exclaimed, quickly pleading with the bike man to help lower the basin. The load slid from her head, and Ada collapsed into his arms. For the first time in years, she wept loudly, her tears flowing like a river long dammed. Passers-by stopped, watching the reunion with awe. Her father's embrace was both comfort and regret, his eyes wet as he realized the betrayal that had unfolded under his sister's roof. Ada's cries pierced the air, not of weakness, but of relief that her pain had finally been seen. In Africa, they say, the eyes that refuse to cry will one day weep blood. That day, Ada's father wept, not because he did not love his daughter, but because he had trusted the wrong person. The lesson is timeless. Love must not only provide, it must protect. For when a child suffers in silence, it is not only her childhood that dies, but also the conscience of the community that allowed it. Ada clung tightly to her father's side, as though afraid he might vanish again. Her frail body trembled, but her heart finally breathed relief. Without hesitation, her father ordered another motorbike to carry the basin of corn, refusing to leave it behind, while he lifted Ada onto his own bike. The road that once bore her tears and heavy burdens now carried her toward freedom. Her small hands wrapped tightly around the only man who would ever protect her, and for the first time in years, Ada felt safe. Back at the compound, tension rose like harmattan dust as Ada's father confronted Mom Nkechi. "Sister, I trusted you with my child," he thundered, his voice breaking with anger and grief. "Every month I sent money for Ada's upkeep. Where did it go?" Mom Nkechi shifted uneasily, her eyes fixed on the ground. She muttered excuses about expenses and hardship, but the truth had already been laid bare. The villagers who had once whispered behind closed doors now stared at her openly, their silence finally shattered by the weight of her exposed cruelty. Their shame heavy, realizing that their quietness had made them accomplices in her suffering. In Nigeria, elders often say, "The child who is not embraced by the village will one day return with scars the village cannot ignore." Ada's scars, though unseen, were etched deep into her spirit, a reminder of what neglect can do. The lesson is clear. Children are the true wealth of African families, and to mistreat them is to wound the very future of the community. Let this story echo beyond Ada's village. Every child deserves love, care, and protection. Silence should never be the answer, for when truth finally comes home, it comes with judgment.